Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the STAR Center's 5-part webinar series on administrative strategies to reduce burnout. Today is the 4th installment of our 5-part series. And today we are going to be talking about workplace wellness and creating a culture of engagement. So welcome, everyone. So today's presentation is brought to you by ACU STAR Center, and the STAR Center is the NCA that ACU has, and it stands for Solutions, Training, and Assistance for Recruitment and Retention. And you can find all things about us at chcworkforce.org. And also at the end of this broadcast, this webinar, along with all of the other webinars in this series, will be archived there, so you can go back and check it out there. So I'm Suzanne Spear. I'm the Director of Workforce Development at ACU. I'm joined today by Mariah Blake, and she is also on staff with us, and she is handling all of the technical issues today. So if for some reason you're having a technical problem or problem connecting, feel free to reach out to her at mblake@clinicians.org. Just a few webinar housekeeping items. We are recording this webinar, as I mentioned earlier, and it is going to be archived on our website. As you go along, feel free to ask any questions you might have in either the chat or the questions box. And you can also use the raise your hand feature to let us know that you have a question, and we'll answer that. We'll get to those at the end of today's webinar. And also sit back and relax and take a breather, take a breath, and have a little fun while we talk about employee engagement today. We are thrilled to have Lisa Hardmeyer-Gray on the line with us today. She is the founder of Intrinsic LLC, and she's going to be continuing her series, or our series rather, on provider burnout. So I'm going to hand it over to Lisa.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Suzanne. Thank you, Mariah. And thank you all for joining us again as we kind of continue on this journey to look at strategies to really reduce, prevent, and hopefully begin to create organizations that are robust and engaging, and maybe someday the idea of burnout prevention won't be as much of an issue, because we'll be creating organizations that are really creating healthy environments for people to come to work, to do the work they love. So thank you all for participating in this, for being curious about new ideas, being willing to try some different things, because the work you do, the work the providers do, is so critical. And to create a healthy environment for all of us to do that is kind of a personal mission. So happy to have you all. And today we're going to be joined later on in the broadcast by George Brewster, who is a leadership consultant from Gimbal Systems, and he'll really talk about how leadership influences engagement. So what we're going to be looking at today, we're going to look first at trends in employer of choice. We're going to kind of get a broad view of who is in the workplace and what are they looking for. Things have certainly changed. We have now 5 generations of people in the workforce, and you probably noticed that you know, the silent generation from the World War II era to the baby boomers to the millennials have very different values in work. And who are they, and how are these values implementing or impacting the culture? We're going to look at culture. You know, that when we go into these organizations, it's a felt sense. What is the culture of the organization? So we're going to define culture and understand really more about its importance to an organization. We're going to look at wellness plans. A lot of organizations, especially in kind of robust economic regions like Seattle, are having to vie for, you know, the best and the brightest, and they're creating environments where workplace wellness is part of the core mission. The environments, the buildings are designed for healthy environments. And many companies are taking steps to create wellness plans and bring them into the organizations, not only for a retention tool, but also a recruitment tool. So we're going to look at that, and then just some considerations for implementation. And finally, looking at leadership styles that are more aligned with being an employer of choice. And I just want to kind of set that up because there are, many days worth of trainings and ways to think about leadership. And we're doing a 1-hour webinar essentially that's looking at several different topics. So we're going to look at just one aspect of leadership style, and George will talk more about that. Okay. So when we started this journey, we were really talking about what is burnout, and the antithesis of burnout is engagement. That, we start out with this flame, which seems to be moving off our screen, and ultimately we end up kind of frazzled and fried and maybe even quitting. So finding ways to engage staff, to create environments that are healthy and robust and a place where you want to come to work. That's what we're talking about today. Let's see. Okay, so let's just start out with a poll question. I'll turn it back to you, Suzanne or Mariah.
All right, so we have our first poll question up on the screen here. What % of the U.S. workforce is disengaged? You could take just a couple of seconds here to chime in with your thoughts. Right. Give it a couple more seconds here, just get a few more voices in. All right.
Here's a hint, it's high.
Suzanne, spoiler alert. Yes. Yes, and the correct
But how high is it, right?
Yeah, that's right. The answer is 70%. Most of you picked 70%. Yes. So 70% of the workforce is disengaged. And if we look at the next slide, look at what that's costing. So the turnover costs are often estimated to be 100% or 300% of the base salary of replaced employees. Disengaged workers cost the U.S. between $450 and $550 billion a year in lost productivity. So when we have, people just not loving their jobs, showing up kind of half there, it's unfortunate for our patients. It doesn't create a healthy, attractive environment for the staff, and it's really costing the organizations a lot in productivity and lost revenue. So when I started looking at this whole idea of burnout and burnout prevention, this book came up, let's see, quite a bit. Patients Come Second. And when they titled the book, they really wanted to shake up the traditional healthcare model that has been for years and years. The patient comes first, the patient comes first. And even at my health center in the last year, we were talking about different situations that have come up, and one of the medical providers was saying, well, the patient comes first, and I just happen to have this book in a bag, and said, well, we really need to stop and rethink that, because if the employees are happy and healthy and engaged, chances are we're going to give more care, we're going to give better care to our patients. So there's really a shift going from the quadruple aim to the from the triple aim to the quadruple aim, and starting to look at staff health as #1 priority. So this is from Harvard Business School, or Harvard Business Review. They did quite a robust study a few years ago, and again, I'm going to have all the references available for you, where they polled a number of businesses about what their greatest assets were. And you can see that from the poll, 82% of companies said that their greatest asset is their talent. But if you look on the right-hand side, only 23% of those same respondents believe that their organization is now attracting and retaining the best talent. So everyone knows that the talent is the most important asset, but many companies are struggling with how to attract them and how to retain them. So let's look at the workplace. Who are we engaging? So like I mentioned, this is the first time in, I think, maybe ever, and this shows 4 generations, but we're working into 5 generations in the workplace. So we have the veterans from the 1922 to 1945, all the way up to the millennials. And you can look across down on the left, the work ethic, what is work, how do we want leadership to be, communication, what are they motivated by, how do they see work-life balance? It's really very different. And one of the things we hear over and over is, the millennials have such a different, have a different attitude about the workplace. They want to get further ahead faster. They need a lot of feedback. They like to work in teams. I'll get a little more into that later. But when we really think about who are we trying to engage, it's not an easy task, because not only do you have different age, different lifestyles, but really coming down to some pretty different core values. And how do you create an environment where there's respect and understanding and collegiality and collaboration with so many different values? So it's a great challenge. And this continues from that same study, that as we think about our talent, the national birth rates are dropping, so the talent pool is shrinking. And this, again, these differences between rural and urban are striking, but this is general. The work is more knowledge-based, so there's a need to attract more educated employees. So engagement and retention will be even more important than it is today. And when we look at the workforce, this is part of some slides that came from Gary Campbell, who's the president of Impact to Lead. He's also the CEO of Johnson Health Center in Virginia, which is a community health center. And looking at today's workforce, millennials have surpassed Generation Xers as the largest generation in the US labor force, and members of millennial groups. So this idea of retention is really interesting, because they tend to change jobs at least 4 times in the first decade out of college. And their wants and needs are very different. We're going to get into that. Requiring more challenging, meaningful work, constant check-in and feedback, training and mission-centric focus over other benefits, and looking at how organizations have to prepare to accept that retention isn't actually the end goal. It's what we strive for, but knowing that that things have really changed. In my father's generation, you went to work for a company, you got a good benefits package. There was even something, I can't even think of the word, pension, a word that seems to be kind of losing traction in our current environment. The idea that, you would actually have payments made after your job, it's just inconceivable to this generation. So we switched. Loyalty is not where it was several generations ago. So when we continue to look at what the young generation wants, what the young talent wants, this still is with the Harvard Review, that building trust and empowerment in teams and across the organization is the most important thing. And George will talk quite a bit about teams. But communication, transparency, passionate and engaging leaders, very high up there. Career paths with opportunities for advancement, needing a clear vision of the goals and the mission, training and development programs, and flexible work conditions. And this is something I hear over and over again, that, you know, especially in these high burnout professions where we're on the front lines with the most needy in society, having some flexibility is really important, and it's achievable. I mean, I'm seeing community health centers that are being incredibly innovative in flexing time. I'm seeing some that, you know, they're kind of in the old school and very rigid, and people aren't happy. So getting really creative about how we think about work-life balance. And the good news, this was done for the community health centers, but a lot of the organizations I think that are tuned in today are dealing with the underserved. And that is one of the highest priorities for this age group. And, you know, I think sometimes the millennials get a little bit of a bad rap. But when you look at this, you know, changing the world, being part of something, is a big part of what they look for in a job, you know, the social value. And so, you know, the community health centers, organizations that serve the underserved, that has a big social value. So you have that in your pocket, and it's just how to leverage all these other things we'll be talking about today. This is a great 12-question Gallup Q12, and if I wonder how many of you are actually doing employee engagement questionnaires. How engaged are your employees? And these are 12 questions. You can get this online, but 12 basic questions that can give you a snapshot of how engaged employees are. Just down at the basic, am I getting what I need? What is expected from me? Do I have what I need to do my job well? Is my contribution recognized and appreciated? This goes to the millennials that there is more of a need there. Someone at work seems to care about me, who encourages my development, recognition, belonging. It's interesting, there's a researcher by the name of Brene Brown, and she does a lot of research on some of these social values, and belonging is such a critical part of our need as humans. And so just that sense at work, do I belong? Do my opinions count? Or do I have a best friend at work? Do I feel like my job is important? So really that sense of belonging. And then finally, growth. Do I have the opportunity to learn and grow? Do I have growth and development opportunities? So kind of looking at these employer of choice trends, you know, in the past, the old model is security in exchange for compensation. The new model is people wanting more meaningful work that's to solve social problems with professional development, autonomy, and the ability to be innovative and bring my creativity and my ideas to change the systems. And we talked a little bit about that last week with some of the lean management and the RPIWs and you know, these work groups that take on their own problems and problem solve. Co-creating with customers or in this case with patients, and this level of trust and transparency that's almost being demanded. So we're going to shift then into culture. So, you know, this is kind of who's in the organization, what is this kind of up and coming talent pool looking for? And then looking at the culture. So this again is from Gary's work, but I love this, that the little old Pac-Man mentality, that organizational culture eats strategy for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So we can have an incredible strategic plan, but what is the culture? And if we focus on employee engagement and creating a positive workforce, that's going to be the differentiating factor between a good organization and a great organization. And there's so much research right now on employee engagement and creating these type of organizations that are very attractive, that are very innovative, that are healthy, that are a good, not only good, but great place to work. Okay, so what is culture? It's the self-sustaining pattern of behavior that determines how things are done. And I love this quote on the right. It's what people do when no one is looking. And so we're going back and forth between, does culture start with the people? Does it start with leadership? It's both. But leadership, as we'll get into, really sets the tone for the culture. And then the staff, how they are with each other, starts defining the culture. But it's instinctive, repetitive habits, emotional responses, and it's what people actually do more than what they say or believe. And when positive culture forces and strategic priorities are in sync, that's when companies can draw energy from the way people feel. And we all know that feeling. We know that feeling when we are in a place where we love the people, we love the mission, we feel a part of it. We feel it. It's a felt sense, and that's really important, because I remember a sketch a while ago about somebody sitting out in their car, part of them sitting out in the car during their work and making sure that the window was rolled open, because part of them left, part of them never came to work. Part of them was just still sitting out in the car, waiting for that other part to come back to work. So do we bring our whole selves to work with all of our passion and our love? Does that happen? And can we really create organizations that bring that? So do we really know what our culture is? Is it the one we want? And who's responsible for it? How does it get measured? And are we willing to reduce productivity temporarily to build a culture of learning? We're so much about the productivity and meeting the measures and the bottom line, but are we budgeting in the culture of learning and just the kind of felt sense of culture that needs to be created? And how do we create culture? So these are just some ideas. Flowers when an employee is sick, or birthday cards, celebrations. If people have to do mandatory overtime, can you imagine how they would feel having a meal delivered or laundry service? These are kind of high-end things for sure, but could we bring in healthy snacks? Could we have a vending machine that always has healthy snacks available? If we can't afford to provide them, could we just have them as a resource? Community gardens. There's a lot of research that shows that people who feel more connected to what they do are that much more engaged with their job. So in our clinics, we're in touch with the mission every day, everyone in the clinic. But is your billing department in a separate building than your clinic? Does your billing department ever get to interact with the patients that they serve? That would be really interesting. Maybe, a few people out of the different admin departments go through a clinic and just shadow or witness or get to have a conversation with the people who are being impacted. Once a year, maybe there's a video at the employee annual meeting, but that real face-to-face for them to understand, yes, I might just be doing billing, but how is it changing the lives of the people that this organization serves? And are we feeling that appreciation? We talked about that last week in kind of our huddles, our morning, our kudos or our high fives. Just those simple acts of appreciation really do go a long way. And do we have fun? Can we do a monthly outing that wouldn't be so cost prohibitive? Engaging the staff, what excites them? Do we have a party planning committee? Do they talk to other people in the organization? People have ideas of what they'd like to see in an organization. So that's a real ability to harness that sense of appreciation and belonging, is asking what motivates you, what makes what would make your job more fun. And I want to really state, and that's kind of a premise of this this webinar, is that we have to really think about compensation, and we're not talking about that in this webinar series, but I'm kind of making an assumption that organizations have done the market analysis and are looking at compensation, because if you're not well paid, it doesn't always matter how much. There's a certain level, how much fun you're having or how much you're enjoying your work, but if you're not being compensated fairly, that's kind of a deal breaker. So compensation has to be there, it has to be fair, and then you can start creating culture with some of these other things. But being careful and being authentic, because I think we probably all experienced situations in different work environments where, the leadership had ideas of what was going to be fun, and it just didn't translate over. So really engaging, this is a great way to engage everyone in the organization to create the culture that they want to be a part of. Okay, then we're going to get into wellness plans. So if you look at this slide, physical and mental health, 1/4 of employees view their jobs, 1/4 of employees view their jobs as the #1 stressor in their lives. And 3/4 of employees believe the worker has more on-the-job stress than a generation ago. So our lives are busier, society is faster paced, we're in some interesting political times. No matter where you are on the spectrum, there's there's just a lot going on in our culture that at the bottom line, people are feeling more stress. And then you just add kind of the demands of the healthcare field and the jobs that we do, and people are taxed. They're really taxed. So anxiety, depression, stress, and burnout are very real. So organizations are, realizing that it impacts the bottom line if their employees are healthy. We're sitting more. Sitting is the new smoking. There's a lot of research showing the actual ill health that's happening just from sitting. So companies are creating a range of wellness plans, and we're going to get into that. I just want to turn back for another poll question to Susanna Mariah.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a two-part poll question. So the first part is, does your organization have a wellness plan? I'll give you guys a second to answer that. Okay, we'll go ahead and close that one.
Okay. Yeah, and a lot of people think that wellness plans are going to be prohibitively expensive. Let's get to the second question before. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I'm so sorry. So the second part is, for those of you that had wellness plans, and Lisa, if you wouldn't mind sharing after this, how many, what the results were. But if you have a wellness plan, is it tied to lower healthcare premiums? Yes or no? Okay, we'll wrap that one up as well.
No, okay. Okay, so, and I'll get into why I asked that second question So when we're talking about wellness programs, I'm going to go, this again, each part of this webinar could be, a webinar in and of itself. So I'm kind of doing some broad strokes, but I want to get some ideas going and give you some things to think about and resources to turn to. But there are many benefits of wellness programs: lowering the healthcare costs, reducing absenteeism, compensation, disability-related costs, injury. The bottom line is healthier employees are happier and more productive. So if we invest in our employees, what is our return?
Okay, next poll question. So what is the average amount saved for every dollar invested in a wellness plan? What do you think that is? What number of these 4 do you think the average might be? I'll give you a few extra seconds for this one since there's some math involved.
We didn't round it up.
Okay, we'll close that one out now.
Okay. 5.63. Okay. So the answer, let's see if we go back to the slides. Okay, so the answer is an average of $3.30 for every dollar invested. I didn't put this particular slide in. I'm going to speak to this right now. The RAND Corporation did a large study of the different types of health plans within an organization. There are 5 actually, but I'll talk about 4. Disease prevention, fitness, smoking cessation, and stress management. So those are kind of the 4 big areas of wellness plans. And with smoking cessation, and I'll include this information later, but the statistic is that smoking costs organizations, depending on the size, $6,000 a year per employee in missed work, going out for a smoke break, productivity, health-related issues, doctor's appointments. So the first couple of steps are really reviewing your claims, the costs, the data, because the ultimate goal is to reduce your costs, increase your productivity. And the costs really, when we have healthy, happy employees, how does that impact the bottom line? So lower absenteeism falls by about almost $3. So the steps to implement, again, there's so many different kinds. You can, begin very basically setting up a fitness team or a walking group, or, some organizations have that have a lot of resources, have gyms, they have quiet rooms. There's such a wide range. Usually it's set up with a health insurance broker administered through the HR department. Larger companies obviously have more resources. Smaller companies can offer incentives such as using a local health club, a healthy eating program, stress reduction classes. And there are, I don't even know how many different corporate wellness programs are out there, but there are many, many resources. It's really crucial, though, to do your homework, because not all of this does have, the investment that you're looking for. It has to be done. It has to be done well. Oftentimes, they first started with kind of setting them up with certain penalties, and the more robust, the more successful wellness programs are incentive-based, and the actual most successful are incentivized to have lower healthcare premiums. So, there are companies that set up with gift cards, or winning a laptop, or some kind of incentive program. It usually begins with a health assessment screening. Participants may be encouraged to participate in weight loss programs, like I mentioned, smoking cessation, nutritional improvement. Stress reduction is huge. I'm going to talk about that a little bit, just because of the environments that we work in. The positive incentives, again, if it's somehow tied to lower healthcare premiums, that seems to be more successful. If employees feel like it's one more thing that they have to do, there are organizations that they have a wellness program that's really tied to their email or their cell phones. And, I've talked to people in those organizations, and it feels like one more thing to do. So, talking to companies, finding programs that have high success rates and implementation rates, and finding out what is going to work for your organization, because they don't all look alike, they don't all fit the same, and we have to tailor it to what's going to work for your organization. But really engaging your staff, going back, because if it's something they feel forced to do, employees lose trust when they're acting against their wishes. And there are a couple of other reasons why you want to do that I'll get to, but you need buy-in. Is the leader of the organization going out to the gym every day? Is he walking at lunch? Is he eating in front of his or her desk, never getting out to talk to people? There has to be buy-in from the top and modeling. These culture shifts take time, and there are some incentives. There are also some concerns. There have been a couple of lawsuits where people feel that these wellness programs have been discriminatory, and some of the testing has been have ended up in lawsuits. So really being careful. So those are some ideas to think about implementing a wellness program. But again, it really is not just about retention, but it's about retaining. And if you have a robust, healthy environment, is that a way to attract employees? And then I just wanted to talk about, we're going to get to this in the next episode as well, but mindfulness is a fast-growing program for stress reduction. We're going to talk about this a little bit more, but Aetna had quite a robust study done on bringing mindfulness and yoga into their organization, and they found that the less stressed out group, or the more stressed out group, had medical costs up to $2,500 a year higher than the least stressed out group. So after some classes, the cost drops. So really thinking about, is this something that would go over in your organization? Could you imagine having someone come in and doing a lunchtime yoga class that doesn't cost that much? Is that feasible? Is it possible? Is someone in your organization already have a mindfulness practice where they might offer a little 10-minute drop-in at lunchtime just for people to kind of calm down, recenter? There might already be someone in your organization with those skills. All right, so the last part, let's go to the next poll question, and this is going to set up George, who's going to be joining us.
Okay, so the last poll question is, what percentage of employees quit their job because of their boss?
And while you're answering that, I'm going to just tell you a little bit about George. George Brewster is the founder of Gimbal Systems. It's a management consultancy that focuses on helping teams and leaders thrive by achieving the results they want. He's passionate about leadership and team development and helping to create healthy systems. All right, so 52% is our answer. Well, George, are you there?
I am here. Can you hear me?
Yes. Welcome, George.
Great. Thank you, Lisa, so much for including me, and great conversation to date this far in the discussion around culture and engagement and all the things we can do to support that. I'm going to talk a little bit about the importance of leadership in that culture building process, and just how important it is. So the answer to the poll is actually 31% of employees quit because they don't like their boss. Another 21% leave due to a lack of empowerment. So clearly, leaders have massive influence on people's day-to-day experience in the workplace in terms of how they show up and the level of engagement that they have based on how that leader is seeing them in the organization. You can see another piece of data here, a survey of 2,000, oh, sorry. That's all right, we'll just go ahead.
Okay.
Not a problem. So Simon Sinek is a great speaker. He's famous for his book called Start with Why, which is really around companies determining, why they're in business and really using that as the marketing that differentiates them. He's gone on to do some more writing about leadership and the importance of it. And I strongly encourage you to sign up for his daily quotes. They're fabulous about leadership and thoroughly enjoy them. And so this is a great quote on his part, that if you hire people just because they can do a job to work for your money, but if they believe what you believe, they'll work for you with blood, sweat, and tears. Leaders that are available, engage, listen, and empower their employees really create fellowship, if you will, where the people that are working with them will do incredible things in service of the success of the whole. And the leader really kind of sets that into motion, if you will, that idea of servant leadership in terms of encouraging others to be and contribute their best on a daily basis. There's no doubt that the leaders are critical. And so what we do in our work, Lisa and I have done this together quite a bit, and I do in my practice, is really start to talk to leaders around this concept of presence and how do they show up moment to moment, situation to situation in challenging times. And so we describe this as a leader's ability to connect authentically with ourselves, starting with the leader themselves, and then with others in order to motivate and inspire a team toward a desired outcome. Leaders are constantly tasked with generating results and making decisions. It's what leaders are paid to do, and they move up from being individual contributors to now having to get things done and accomplished with and through other people. And it's not always an easy transition for those that do it, going from a strong individual contributor to now all of a sudden figuring out how to motivate and inspire others to do the daily work that's necessary under stressful conditions. And so, a big part of what we work with leaders on is just how do they build themselves and be honest and open and authentic with who they are in service of really inspiring and motivating others to do the same and creating a safe environment for people to do that. It's not always easy work for leaders that are under constant duress and needing to generate results and make high impact decisions. So how do we help leaders start to develop this skill set is sort of bringing into mind what we call sort of a 1-2 combination of skill sets. When you're looking to motivate others and inspire and get work through others, we really need to use what is called an emotional intelligence. And some of you may be aware of this. Daniel Goleman's sort of the most well-known author around emotional intelligence. And really the way that I like to think about it is it's the capacity for a leader to be self-aware first of what's going on for them, but simultaneously be aware of and curious about what's going on for the other person, and then figure out ways to take care of themselves when they're under duress and knocked off balance. And the way to sort of develop emotional intelligence, and part of the reason Lisa and I have joined forces, is through practice of mindfulness, where you're really spending time quieting your mind, teaching yourself how to be self-aware and cognizant of what's going on moment to moment. And the fun thing about emotional intelligence for me is that with dedicated practice and work, it is something that you can improve. And at the end of the day, all of this is really to try and help leaders and any individuals at work to become more aware of yourself and others and be able to focus on what's needed in the moment. And really the focus part is the hardest part, I think, in today's environment. Clearly, there is a lot in our world that makes life and work in particular challenging. We'll go to the next slide there, Lisa. Thanks. So we like to put this slide up a lot of times because we honestly think that this is mostly what people experience on a day-to-day basis in fast-moving, client-centered patient care facilities, where a lot is happening all the time. We're inundated with requests, meetings, emails, phone calls, etc. And oftentimes it can feel quite overwhelming, especially when you're a leader and all eyes are on you for direction, the answers, etc. And you're trying to maintain and promote and create a culture that's dynamic and empowers people to be. At times it can feel quite overwhelming. And if you look really closely, there is a little head down there in that photograph. And so building the capacity to sort of increase your tolerance for this type of event is critical. And leaders that do it more successfully through self-care, a practice of growing their attentiveness and a capacity to be more present and listen to the needs of and be curious of the needs of their employees and the team that they're overseeing, really can make a substantial difference in any person's experience on a day-to-day in the workforce. It's a big ask of leaders, but that's partly what you're enrolled to do. And what we do in helping leaders evolve and progress is get them to become more comfortable with duress and explore it and look at it as a learning laboratory for how do they show up, and be curious how others perceive and experience them under duress, be open to feedback and input, and be seeking it out. And all of that starts to create an environment where there's more safety, openness, and trust, and people tend to be more engaged and willing to do more, take risks, and be more creative to find solutions to problems. You know, there's a fair bit to take on as a leader, but we think there are some skills and tips and tricks and things that we can be doing to help them expand their capacity to navigate even these troublesome ocean waves that are crashing in on you. Let's talk about one of the biggest examples where this comes up as it relates to culture is where there is perhaps a challenging team member or someone within the organization that may not be living the values or exuding them on a regular basis, or perhaps engaging with the customers the way that we like. And so we put this up here as a way to really draw the attention that one of the most challenging things leaders have to face is when something isn't going right, or someone isn't performing the way, or isn't meeting the expectations, and the cost of not doing something about that, right? So so often or not, teams can really go sort of sideways or lose their productivity based on one potential person's challenging behaviors or lack of performance. And oftentimes this can be really a leadership crucible for leaders to figure out, how do I address this in a way that's caring and compassionate, models the values that I care about, but at the same point addresses the issues that are undermining how the team is performing and the results that we're achieving. You know, you can put an ROI towards it, like what we've done here is that it can impact you in dollars and cents, which is oftentimes how leaders are measured, but it can also impact the morale of those on the team when bad behavior is let go or isn't addressed, or underperformance isn't addressed. And so a lot of the work that we do with leaders sometimes is to talk them through and coach them through the challenging situation of performance issues, and in some ways their resistance to taking it on or doing something about it is undermining their credibility as a leader, because everyone else sees that there's a bad apple, but they're not doing something about it. So leaders are really tasked with ensuring that they maintain what are the critical pieces of the culture. As we said, it's what people do, and it's the leader's job to really reinforce and model and protect those behaviors. So, you know, we could talk at great length about this, and certainly enjoy the opportunity to at least broach the subject with you. Our belief is that leadership presence and the development of it brings really tangible benefits to not only the leader, but the team that they oversee, and then ultimately the organization. As Lisa spoke to earlier, you know, this is something that is felt and experienced by those that you lead around you. If you, we oftentimes do a question of, you know, sort of a visualization of a great leader versus a challenging leader, and we get descriptors, and it's amazing how the people in the room really do change what they feel based on the experience of the leader that they're describing. So leaders that are fully present really inspire and drive engagement and retention. They help build resiliency in themselves and their teams and their organizations to navigate this constant change of which you all exist in. And ultimately, it's twofold, right? In that it creates healthier leaders, but those leaders then create healthier workplaces. And then obviously, if your workplace is humming and thriving, the patients that come to see you are going to get better care and service and become healthier as well. And so finally, all of this leads to a more positive, healthy, sustainable culture that's not only going to help you retain engaged employees, but will also be a competitive differentiator when you're looking to attract talent in a more and more competitive marketplace. So that's just a little bit of a snippet around the benefits of leadership presence and some of the things that we think help build it and how it supports a culture of engagement. I'll stop there, and perhaps we open it up to Q&A, or turn it back to you, Lisa.
Great, thank you, George. And I will turn it back to Susanna Mariah if there are questions.
Sure. Thanks to you both. Just had a quick question come in. Of course, anybody's free to pop into the questions box or the chat box here. But we have one question come in. George, what was the title of the book that you mentioned in your first couple of slides there?
Oh, sure, certainly. I think I was in reference to Simon Sinek, was a quote that I put up, and he's famous for his book that's called Start with Why. I highly recommend it. It's a good read.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right, we do have just a few minutes left here, so if anybody wants to hop into the questions box or the chat box with questions, comments about today's presentation, feel free. While we're wrapping up, I'll kind of give a couple of follow-up reminders to everybody on the line that you will be receiving a copy of the slides and a recording tomorrow by email. If you want the slides right this very minute, you can access them in our handout tab on the GoToWebinar attendee panel to the right of your screen. So you can download those right now, or you can get them tomorrow by email. This session and all the other sessions from this series will also be hosted on our website at chcworkforce.org. Okay, and we have,
it looks like,
oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Nope, I just was going to say that it looked like there was another question that came in, Mariah.
Yep. The question that came in was, how many people do you believe are doing this type of work, joy in work?
Oh, do you mean the whole? Well, it's hard to get the more feedback on the question. That is a great question, and I will look into that and maybe have the answer next week. I can say from I don't have the numbers, but I can say it seems that it's happening more in the clinics or the healthcare environments that have more resources. You know, the Mayo clinics, the clinics with lots of resources, and it seems to be kind of trickling down. So I don't have a number, but I do see that it is kind of a wave that is happening. And George, do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I think the only thing I would add is that you know, the more and more companies are starting to and clinics are starting to figure out how can we support our development of our leaders, and what are the ways that we can do that, especially in sort of small bite-sized pieces, and make it real-time applicable learning. You know, that's obviously the secret that they're trying to crack of how do we make this more accessible to people, and not have it be a day-long training or you know, multiple day offsite when there's still so much to be doing. So, you know, the good news is that there are more and more alternatives to that, and more companies are starting to figure out how to offer that in more accessible ways. So my sense is that there, as Lisa said, there's a momentum building to be doing more of this, and make it more broadly accessible.
Great. And I know we just have very limited time left, and this question kind of seems like a larger one, but if we could kind of get started with it. How would you start on this when there historically has been a culture of blame at an organization? So how do you start to build trust?
I'll turn that one over to you, George.
It is a great question, and you know, I think changing culture is one of the hardest things that can happen, and building trust is not an easy thing. I think where it really, what I try to say to folks is it begins with the first, the courage, if you will, to have the challenging conversations, right, and have direct conversations. And even if it's a little bit challenging and scary to do, somebody has to have the courage to sort of start modeling and changing the behavior that that's been eroding trust. And so if there has been a lot of blame or unacceptable things, the courage is to state that and state the impact that it's having on you. So start with a strong I statement, and be a courageous leader, even if you're not in an overt role of leadership. The more you can start having the direct conversation, sharing impact that might be unintended. Whoever's blaming may not know that that's what they're doing. So to me, it comes back to sort of starting with the direct conversations, having the courage to have them, and sharing your immediate experience of what it is. And in the process of doing that, what you're doing is being more truthful and open and honest, and you're starting to hopefully change the culture from blaming to more of inquiry and curiosity and learning in relationship with each other. That's my short answer to it, but it's not easy work, and takes one conversation at a time to make it happen.
Great, thank you for that. If we have reached at the top of the hour here, so we're going to wrap up. I ask that everybody on the line please stick around for just one more second, and you'll have an evaluation, just a couple of questions pop up on your screen to let us know how we're doing. And if you have any other questions that we haven't been able to answer here, or you'd like to follow up with either of our presenters after today's session, just leave that in the comments there and we'll get you connected. Thank you, George and Lisa, for your time today, and thank you everybody on the line for joining us. And I hope you all have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, Mariah, and we'll hopefully talk to most of you or all of you next week for our last session on self-care.
Yes, thank you so
Wonderful.
much, everyone. Have a great day, great afternoon.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.